Доброго дня. Пані Ірино, добрий день. Конкурсна комісія
Good
вас
afternoon,
вітає.
Irina.
Чи ви нас чуєте, бачите?
The Selection Commission is welcoming you. Can you see and hear us? Yes, good afternoon. I can see and hear you perfectly well. So welcome at the second stage of the selection process for the High Qualification Commission of Judges at the interview stage. The interview is held by all members of the Selection Commission. Let me introduce the members, Robert Brookhuizen, me, Ivan Mishchenko, Sergey Verlanov, Tedzadzachny, Steven Markman, and Ivan Mezencev. And the rapporteurs are going to be Robert Brookhuizen and Ivan Mezencev. In case, for some reason, the interview is interrupted due to an air alarm or absence of power, the Commission will definitely reach you and we will appoint another time and another date for the interview. And we will start with the place where we stop. The request is for you to give concise and quick answers, and in fact, the member of the Commission who asks the question can limit the duration of your answer. At the beginning of the interview, you will have a chance to present your thoughts within 5 minutes, to tell about your motivation, about your ideas, and how you see the work of the updated HQCJ, your place in it, whatever you decide. We are starting the interview, and let me give the floor to Robert and Yevhen. Please, you're welcome.
Good afternoon, Iryna, if you don't mind that I say Iryna, because that's easier. The names in Ukraine are a bit difficult for a foreigner. You have the first 5 minutes for your introduction, and maybe you also tell us who you are, and that also the people who look at this YouTube thing will also know who you are. Maybe that you're a professor in criminal law is of interest, but it's to you. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon once again, dear commissioners, dear audience, and let me start with saying why I got the idea and the desire to participate in this selection. It was in about mid-February 2022 that I came across the video about participation of women in the composition of the future High Qualifications Commission of Judges of Ukraine. And in that stream, I saw Steven Markman and Yevhen Mezencev, and it was moderated by Nadia Stefaniev. And besides the fact that the commissioners were telling about the selection, about the requirements to the candidates, about the gender balance as they see it in the future commission, they also kind of urged and encouraged the lawyers to submit documents, to submit their applications for this competition. And that was the first time when I got the willingness to try my hand at this and to submit the application for participating in this selection procedure. So I got acquainted with the documents. But you know, the war that broke out at the end of February introduced its changes. The commission terminated its operation, and I had some more time to think it over, this step, to think about all the pros and cons, and the full-scale invasion that started actually a year ago, in fact, affirmed me in my decision to take this step. In spite of all the awful things that are now happening in our country, war will also have positive sides, no matter how strange it sounds. And the first of these positive things, which is already taking place, is reconsideration of values, reconsideration of the way of one's living, reconsideration of a lot of things. And personally, for me, this is first of all about the ability to appreciate what you already have, and the realization of the fact that you need to live now and not to postpone your life later, because later may often result in never. And here is one more thing war has manifested. It has shown that each of us can change something. Of course, it's much easier to work in a team to introduce some changes, but teams consist of individuals. And these considerations encouraged me to participate in the competition. And I think that in the post-war period after our victory, Ukraine will have great chances, which actually not every country often has. I would call these changes that could occur tectonic changes. And in my vision, these tectonic changes could create the society of free and not indifferent people. And of course, this society is possible only on condition a lot of reforms are carried out, including the reform of the judiciary, because finally it really depends on the judiciary of the country whether this society is built or not. If court is not respected and not trusted by the society, and if the society does not see court as the guarantee of its rights and legal interests, of course it will be difficult to build the society I'm dreaming of. And the role of the High Qualifications Commission of Judges of Ukraine in the development of such honest and fair court cannot be overestimated. I realized that the role and the mission of the member of the HQCJ is really a difficult thing to do, but I think that I can be useful in this role because, as I think, I meet the requirements that are set for candidates, formal, but not only formal ones. As my studies are concerned, I generally was born and live in Lviv. I also graduated from Lviv, Ivan Franko National University. I graduated with honors, and in 2011 I presented my PhD. It was crimes against property under the criminal law of Ukraine. I was granted the rank of associate professor, and mostly throughout my life I've been dealing with scientific research and activity in lecturing. At the moment, I'm the head of the Department of Criminal Law and Criminology of Lviv State University of Internal Affairs. Before that, I was the lecturer, the associate professor of the same department. But my field of interest includes criminal law. What skills do I consider to be of use for the future role of...
Well, maybe we'll get to that during the interview. Okay? Well, thank you for the introduction, which I found really interesting. And as a reaction to what you have said, I would ask you what you would expect or wish to may happen after those tectonic changes that you are referring to. How do you wish that the Ukrainian society, and especially the judicial society, looks like if things may happen as you hope that they will? So what are the changes that you hope that will take place?
Well, it seems to me that the changes I would be striving for are as follows. Our society, after victory, should behave the way it behaved on the first days of the full-scale invasion. I mean, it should be united, cohesive, mutually supportive. These are the things that are admired by the whole world. And I hope that the world is still admiring those skills. The unity of different political parties. Russian-speaking citizens of Ukraine were supported by Ukrainian-speaking citizens of Ukraine. So I think that unity and cohesion is something that should not be lost after the war. This is what war has shown to us. But, our society likes having different divisions and controversies. This is, of course, good if this leads to some constructive discussions, but it is bad if one part of the society just opposes the other part of the society on the basis of some minor things.
Оце єднання
And therefore, this unity
це якщо стратегічно дивитися, якщо переходити ближче
is important from the strategic point of view. But if we go closer to the consideration of the judiciary and what it should look like, I would say that the court should be advocating the values for which now the whole Ukrainian nation is fighting. These are the values of freedom, justice,
І якщо в загальних рисах,
And,
якщо до деталей, то звичайно
well,
можливо.
this is in general. If you would like me to proceed to details, that would be long. If
Okay,
you need me
but
to
it's fine.
continue, please let me know.
It's fine. Well, I will take this a bit further because you indicated in your motivation letter that immediately after graduating from one of the universities, you tried yourself as a defense attorney in court, but it was not a success. And the reason it was not a success, you wrote, is that the judge, where you went to court to, told that he found the defendant's case to be much stronger and added to you, it's my translation, that lawyers who know the judge win far more cases than those who know the law. And you have written that this incident was one of the reasons that you decided not to be a defense attorney anymore, but to become a professor in law. My question to you is, do you believe that this still may happen in the present times? And what will you do as a member of the HQCJ to change this in such a way that the judges are independent and would look more at the rule of law and the laws and not so much at the lawyer in front of them?
Так, це був доволі прикрий інцидент.
Yes, that was a rather sad incident, and what I was frustrated with the most was that, well, in fact, I don't think that I can say that there is no corruption either in Ukraine or any other country of the world. I don't think that any single country has ever managed to overcome corruption, but in that case, I was not that much frustrated with the fact that I got the impression that the case was settled through corruption because I didn't have any clear evidence. And of course, I couldn't say that this could be proven. I cannot state about this. But I was frustrated with the fact that the judge arrogantly and openly told me about that. When I approached him after the decision was passed and asked to explain to me, I said, I don't understand why so, please explain it to me. He just openly and arrogantly told me that the arguments, but by the arguments he meant arguments in the inverted commas, were more convincing. And he said that quite often the one who knows the judge and not the one who knows the law wins in court case. So I was most frustrated with the arrogance of this answer. The judge was not even trying to conceal this fact. And I think that the arrogance of his answer predetermined my choice of career and stopped me on my way to legal practice, to being the attorney, and made me reject it. Well, maybe it was a decision taken on the spot because, my experience of being a law was very short. Probably I shouldn't have passed this hasty decision, but that was the point of time when I realized that it would be difficult for me to put up with this. This does not correspond to my vision. What would I do to overcome such things in the future if I'm a member of the HQCJ? I think that such things like integrity are well, are the things that can be determined on the basis of analysis of the dossier and documents, but it seems to me that face-to-face communication with a person is much more important for you to be able to determine this and to see what the vision of the person is of different issues. Of course, nobody will answer yes if you ask him, are you a corrupt person? But you know, in my practice, by the way, I have met such people who claim that, of course, I take some bribes. It was a doctor. Yes, they just want to express my gratitude to their gratitude to me for my work. They just bring it themselves, and I just take it. Such people consider that this is a normal thing to do. But judges who are well aware of the legislation would hardly tell yes at the interview if asked such a question. But I think that on the basis of a lot of questions, I think that you can make the impression, you can get the impression about the values of a certain person and the perception of some phenomena. And in the motivation letter, which all the candidates had to write, I came to like the question about the values that you find most difficult to comply with. This is a very difficult but a very good question. But the answer to this question can really show a lot of things.
Пані Ірино,
Ірина,
Please go ahead. Go ahead.
пані Ірино, а повертаючись от до цієї історії з цим суддею,
запитання. Getting back to this story with the judge,
перше питання, чи подавали ви апеляційну
did
скаргу?
you submit the
Як ви пояснили
appeal,
це клієнту?
and how did you explain all this to the client?
Ну, клієнту я пояснила так, як мені
Well, I explained it to the client the way the judge explained it to me. I didn't consider it to be right to invent something. And what about your responsibility to the client? Well, I think that the responsibility to the client probably lies in the fact that if the judge has openly told this to me, I cannot invent any pretexts and arguments. What about recusals, appeal, cassation, claims against the High Council of Justice? You know, that was the year 2001. There was an appeal, by the way, but the appeal just confirmed the decision, and that's it.
Тобто апеляція була.
So there was the appeal process. Yes.
Дякую.
Thank you.
Well, I would pass the floor to my dear friend Yevgen.
Thank you. Доброго дня, пані Ірино.
Good afternoon, Irina.
Ви дуже потішили мене тим, що
You
зауважили, що саме моя
have pleased me with the fact that you have said that my and Stephen's good work actually incentivized you to participate in the selection process. But I'm not sure that you will be so much grateful to me after I ask my questions, but I have to ask them.
Ну, по-перше, давайте я
Well,
хотів би трішки
first of all, let me add to what Robert has asked you, and let me enumerate the criteria of correspondence to the law you meet. You were born in 1980. You have got 21 years of experience in law. For 18 years, you have been a lecturer. And judging by the external sources from which I've got information about your professional career is rather good. You are a PhD specializing in criminal law and criminology. You are an associate professor and you've got the certificate about the command of the official Ukrainian language, and you got this certificate in August 2022. These are the formal things which show that your candidacy complies with the requirements of the law on the judicial status of judges. Let me mention right away that as far as professional issues are concerned, your professional competence is concerned, we don't have any critical remarks. From the information of CSOs, and we have to ask you this question, there is just one of your scientific papers prepared back in 2012 in co-authorship with Mr. Oleg Tatarov. Of course, that was not the period of time when he was a deputy head of the presidential office. He worked in the chief investigative office of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Ukraine, and the public didn't have any remarks concerning his activity back then, but now we do have. And let me ask you the following. What is your relationship with Mr. Tatarov? Do you have any relationship with him now? And what kind of relationship did you have with him in political and professional life?
Я очікувала.
Yes, I actually expected this question. We got acquainted with Mr. Tatarov at one of the scientific and practical conferences held at our University of Internal Affairs. Back then, he was the staff member of the Chief Investigative Office of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. He participated in this meeting, this conference, and actually the idea for this article was born during that conference. Back then, in the Chief Investigative Office, there was some letter to the head of this office concerning the qualifications under Article 194, damage to property. And that was actually the object of my scientific interest, because my PhD thesis was related to that. So there was a discussion during the conference, and there was an idea born on the fact that we have to write this article. And actually, we worked remotely. I wrote something, sent it to him, to Oleg Tatarov, and it was all done by correspondence. We don't have any relationship as for now, and actually all our relationship was limited to one article. You know, we pay a lot of attention to the issue of political engagement and political neutrality within this selection, and that's why almost every candidate is examined in respect of political engagement. Questions are asked. And, you know, concerning you, there is the question. Your husband, in 2006-2010, used to be the deputy of Lviv City Council from Nasha Ukraine, if I'm not mistaken. He was also a candidate to the Verkhovna Rada of the Seventh Calling, and in 2011, if I'm not mistaken, he became the head of Lviv City Center of the Congress of Ukrainian Nationalists. Well, let me tell to our foreign colleagues that the Congress of Ukrainian Nationalists is one of the oldest parties in Ukraine. It was registered in 1991 or 1992, party number 11 back then, and this is the party of the right wing. Could you tell us, don't you think that this could somehow prevent you from adequate performance of your duties and actually could cast doubt on your personal political neutrality, because this is the person who is your partner, who is the nearest person to you, and he is an active political figure, at least within the region or within the city of Lviv? I would say that it's actually a barrier more in my personal life, because I do not share a lot of political views of my husband. No, we're not talking about sharing. Yes, I understand what you mean by your question. I just wanted to mention this. Being a right-wing politician is an honor now, right? So we would like to find out what the criteria of your political neutrality are. Not being in controversy with your husband, but being neutral. Well, I'm not talking about controversy. I was just trying to show that this is a barrier for me in family life sometimes. May lead to some minor things, but the fact that my husband is an active political figure does not yet say that I'm not a politically neutral person. I cannot that I'm not interested in politics. I'm interested in everything that is happening around me. But I used to be the attested staff member of the Ministry of Internal Affairs, the militia, police, where we also have this requirement of political neutrality. But my husband, even back then, was a political figure, but that was not a barrier on my way to being a police major. Concerning whether this can cast any doubt, well, yes, but whether this really proves that I'm politically engaged, no. Because I know that I'm politically neutral. Of course, I do go to the election, I make my choice, but nothing more.
На цьому крапка.
Це активне право.
That's just it.
Його
Yes,
не
that
може
is your
бути
active
позбавлено.
right. You cannot be deprived of the right to go to the election.
Наскільки обирається ваш
But
чоловік і
we are talking more about your husband being active in this direction, being elected. But okay, your answer is clear. Thank you. Let's go over again to the issues related to integrity.
Це серйозне питання.
This is a very serious issue, one of the most important ones.
І в цьому контексті
And in this context, you have actually stated in your motivation letter that you see that you are a person of integrity and all people around you also support you in this idea.
протягом останніх 22 років
Please tell us, over the recent 22 years, according to the data of the state tax inspection, you have earned about 1.8 million hryvnias, and your husband, who, besides his political activity, is also doing some business, has earned 2.2 million hryvnias. Again, let me remind you that this is over the recent 24 years. You have declared in your recent declaration $50,000 of your savings, or rather of the savings of your husband, and 25 of your own savings. And here is the question: how did you manage to save such amounts of money, taking into account the fact? Well, just get me right. Why do we pay so much attention to declarations? That's because right after you are, or somebody else is appointed member of the HQCJ, there will be automatic inspection of the National Agency for Corruption Prevention, and we wouldn't like to lose a candidate we have recommended because there are some problems with the declaration. That's why we, the primary unit of control, an examination of the correspondence of your declarations to the rules. Though in fact, the national agency should deal with that. So this is the first question: how did you save such amounts? And the second question is related to crypto coins. Over the recent year, together with your husband, you earned 547,000. If I'm not mistaken, your earnings are 297,000, if I'm not mistaken, and 2/3 have been spent on crypto coins, 196,000 hryvnias. Don't you think that this is a risky thing to do? Because volatility of crypto coins is still there. And why do you have the need to buy crypto coins? It's a rather controversial issue, you know, and you spend 2/3 of your salary on that. So what money do you live on then? Please, your answer. Thank you for the question.
Я навіть не знаю, з чого розпочати.
I don't even know what to start with. Let me start with the first question. Doesn't matter. If you forget some question, I will remind you.
Значить,
Okay.
більшість моїх
So,
грошових заощаджень,
most of my savings are the money that I inherited from my grandmother.
вона померла
She
в 2000
died in 2002
залишивши мені тоді
and
на той час
left
доволі велику суму.
quite an amount of money to me. That was about $26,000.
Більшість цих коштів я так і не трачу,
And I've been just keeping this money up till now. I don't spend this money. It's kind of a financial pillow for that. Well, for a rainy day? Well, not for a rainy day, but I have 3 children. One of they are adults. My son has graduated from the 11th form, or is graduating, and my daughter is in the 10th form, so it's just money for their tuition, for some other things, just in reserve. Something which is necessary for teenagers and which would be the best investment. Okay, but what about your husband? 50,000 of savings. Well, his business is rather successful, and he has been actually a businessman for quite a period of time. Even when we got acquainted and got married, he was already a successful businessman. And before entrepreneurial activity and activity as a lawyer, he worked in the electron concern. with quite a high salary, then in some aviation enterprise. So he had the savings
було достатньо ще на момент нашого знайомства.
Ну, я
back
розумію, пані
then.
Ірино. Питання не в тому,
Yes,
що він,
but I don't mean
скажімо
that
так, не мав цих доходів.
he didn't have this income.
За даними
But
податкової,
according to the data of the state tax inspection, only 2.2 millions are reflected there starting with 1998.
вступили в шлюб, перепрошую.
When did you get married? In 2001.
Ну, саме питання у такому ключі.
So
Уточніть, будь ласка, в
just
17-му році ви
specify,
придбали
clarify it. In
автомобіль Peugeot.
2017, you bought Peugeot
Всього цей 308
for yourself, right?
Витративши на нього тоді
308 cc. You spent 116 something hryvnias. Your earnings were 120,000. Your husband had even less. So what is it? Was it from the savings or what was the source of origin? But you are talking about the annual earnings. Yes, right in the year when you bought this Peugeot. Yes, but it doesn't mean that I buy a car every year. Of course, it was done from the savings as well. In hryvnias, you have mentioned the amount, but if I'm not mistaken, it was about $6,000 in the equivalent to dollars. In 2017, well, I don't remember, but it does matter that much. 6 or 6,500, I don't remember. So that was not a new car with some high value, and this is the car I still have. Okay, and here is another point. Your husband, even before you got married, was the owner of the apartment, 40 square meters in Knязя Романа Street in Lviv.
Львові, звичайно, у Львові. Це історичне місце і
This is a historical place, and the data of the real estate agency says that this is the so-called Austrian luxury apartment, quite a good apartment. What was the source of origin of this apartment, of the money for this apartment? You know, I didn't inquire because he had this apartment when we got acquainted, so I somehow did not inquire what were the sources of income. You didn't ask. You didn't ask a close person where from the money is. Well, you can agree that this is probably not the best question at the stage when you're getting acquainted. Yes, but now, unfortunately, within the selection process, we have to ask this question. Before you, we had a candidate who had the apartment bought for him at the age of 17, and after that he became a judge, and he has to provide explanations why his relatives decided to buy him an apartment at the age of 17. Yes, concerning this apartment, when we were getting married, he was the owner of that apartment, so this is not our joint combined property, and somehow this is the answer.
Steven, it's your turn.
Thank you, Professor, for participating in our competition. You said something that I thought was very important a little while ago when you said that you want to be part of a team, but teams are comprised of individuals. I think that was a thoughtful statement. You must work both as part of a team and as an individual. And I want to ask you about the latter, as an individual. As an individual, as Commissioner Iryna, what would you bring to your work every day? I mean, what would you do when you think of the judge that you mentioned a little while ago? Why, among many good people, should this commission select Professor Iryna? And what would your experiences teach you? How would you identify candidates who are like that judge and who are not like that judge and avoid candidates who are like that judge? How would you change the judiciary of Ukraine by your experiences and your commitments and your values? You spoke about the values of freedom and justice, and I would guess you would probably include the rule of law as well. But when you take all those values and you come to work every day and you look at the need to work with your team, but you also look to inside of yourself to ask you, what is it that I want to bring to this team? What are your strengths and what are your deepest commitments? Can I ask you, I know it's a hard and difficult question, but why should we look in your direction for membership on this very important commission?
Ну, звичайно, що я не маю досвіду
Well,
відбору
of course, I don't have the experience of selecting judges, and I cannot have it at the present stage, but I do have the experience of selecting people for training, because on many occasions I have participated in the selection commission at our university. So I have the experience of running interviews for our graduates. All our exams or all our graduation exams take place in the oral form, not in the written form. So I do believe that this experience of selecting people, of oral communication, may be of importance during my future work as a member of HQCJ.
Так само я
But tell me, most of all, how do you distinguish? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but tell me, most of all, how do you distinguish between those candidates who are going to be judges like your judge and those who will be something better than that?
важко їх відрізняти, мабуть,
It
дуже
will be
важко.
difficult to distinguish such judges. I do realize that this is a difficult task. Well, primarily, we'll have to review all the information, all of the documents that will be submitted about such judges. And then in the process of oral communication during an interview with the candidate,
Треба вміти також шукати
we will need to have the skills to ask the right questions
дати розкрити
that will give us the opportunity to see who the candidate is. Because everybody knows how to pick the right words,
різні, скажімо, можуть бути, не мені вам розказувати.
but I think I shouldn't be telling you about questions because you are the ones asking questions here today.
Я би, наприклад, зовсім не заперечувала
Well, I wouldn't mind
при доборі суддів,
if during the selection of judges we would use a polygraph. It appears to me that the use of polygraph has more benefits than drawbacks. But of course, there are some drawbacks in the use of polygraph testing.
є аргументи як на користь.
There are some arguments for and against this approach, but my personal opinion is that in the selection of judges, it would be quite sufficient to use a polygraph. Of course, the opinion of the polygraph expert cannot have the decisive meaning, but if we discuss the corruption, let's say, it's always hidden. It's something that is not in the open. It's something that is hard to prove because both sides to a corrupt action want to keep it hidden for as long as possible. Let's say if we talk about rape or theft, we always have the victim who can complain. In corruption, both sides are involved and they are not interested in other people discovering their corruption. That's why proving such types of crimes is really difficult. Before we have the final judgment, we cannot clearly say that this specific person has committed any specific type of crime or offense.
В цьому контексті вас
But in this context, it appears to be of use to use polygraph testing while selecting stuff.
Well, I hope that if you are appointed to the High Qualifications Commission, you don't ever forget that judge that you spoke of, and you don't ever forget your determination that maybe someday there would be a better judiciary in Ukraine. You would be in a position to make that difference, and I hope you don't forget how you felt when you heard that judge speak to you. Let me ask you one other question, if I can, please. I am very pleased that you are a tough professor, and you have indicated that you have not hesitated to give failing grades to students who've deserved those grades. Is that correct?
так.
Yes, that's true.
I hope that you also give great emphasis in your work on the commission, if you're appointed to that commission, to give hard grades to the judges that you're assessing in the process too. Because if you don't judge them by a hard standard, a demanding standard, there will be other young Irynas in the courts around Ukraine who will have the same experiences with not so good judges that you've had. So I guess I'm asking you a second time, don't forget that judge, and don't forget what you didn't like about your interaction with that judge, and don't forget the sense of how difficult it was to explain things to your client and how it was so frustrating that you decided to go into an entirely different line of work in response.
Це важко забути.
Thank you. It's something that I will never forget. Sometimes I even try to do it, but it's impossible.
Разючі враження.
Because it was such a stark impression, it's something that stays with you for life.
Well, that's good. It's not necessarily bad. That's good in this job on the High Qualifications Commission. Thank you very much.
Пані Ірино, скажіть, будь ласка,
Dear Iryna,
ви практично всю свою
so throughout your professional career, you've been doing research and you've been working as a lecturer of criminal law, which can be seen from your autobiography and the documents that you have provided to the Commission.
такого плану запитання.
So my question is as follows.
Чому конкурсна комісія повинна зробити
Why should the selection commission decide that you are
у нюансах функціонування та
competent enough about how the judiciary of Ukraine is functioning and what its challenges and problems are? Thank you for this question. Why do I know about the inner operation of the judiciary and the challenges that it's facing?
Орієнтація, напевно, носить більше в такі
Well,
теоретичні.
I'm more of a theoretician than a practitioner in this respect, but
Я черпаю, власне,
on most occasions I get my information from those research and practical events that I try to attend, and I've mentioned this in the documents that I'm the co-organizer of Lviv Forum of Criminal Justice. It's an annual event taking place in Lviv,
поганий
and it has
відгук. Так?
it's received rather good feedback from the members of our community, and during this forum we discuss not just the law but also the procedure.
Говоримо, власне, кримінальної
We talk about the issues of criminal justice in general.
Наприклад, цивільного права.
Maybe if we talk about civil or administrative law, I'm less knowledgeable because my specialization is quite narrow.
Дуже швидко вчусь.
But I'm a quick learner, I like learning, and I don't think that if I'm an associate professor, that's the end of my career, that I've reached the peak. I'm never satisfied with what I have.
Швидко сприймаю нову інформацію.
I can learn new information very quickly, and I love learning in general. That's why I believe that my persistence should be enough, should there be any gaps in my practical skills, should I lack any knowledge.
дали з приводу процесу і права?
So you mentioned that about law and the procedure, but how about the problems and challenges of the judiciary?
Проблем ви маєте на
The inner problems, do you mean the selection of people? No, I mean the general issues with the Ukrainian judiciary. So you, as a future member of HQCJ, should be aware of those issues so that in your activities
Своїми діями
you're able to overcome these issues
краще
and improve the situation so that you can introduce changes for the better. Maybe I'm not aware of all the issues existing in the judiciary. I'm not trying to claim that I know absolutely everything, but I do believe that in our community, hardly we can find people that don't know about these problems. So can you please name those problems? The problems that the future HQCJ should solve Well, first of all, include the selection of people, the qualification assessment of the people who have not yet completed it, and also the selection of people to fill in the vacancies, because we are lacking judges, and that's the key issue, which is the cause of all the other problems. And with a heavy workload, even a very professional judge is limited in their capacities because they have a lot of work to do. Yeah. These are the functional duties of the commission. But what about the challenges and problems that you would like to overcome to make the selection, the assessment better? The selection of candidate judges, the assessment of incumbent judges. Well, the first and key issue is the trust in the judiciary from the public. Because due to the selection of professional people of integrity, well, I cannot say that all of our judges are not professional and lack integrity at the moment, but we do have some exceptions. So this trust in the judiciary from our people, we need to do everything to elevate it, to enhance the level of this trust. Of course, it cannot be done overnight, and it doesn't mean that if I'm appointed as member of the HQCJ, I can myself change the situation dramatically. But how can this level be enhanced? Of course, justice must be transparent. We should not only administer justice, but we need to show to the people what we are doing, because people have this stereotype that they shouldn't go to courts because they will only waste their time there. And where does the stereotype come from? It comes from some notorious cases that everybody is discussing. And these negative examples are part of the problem, and they contribute to lack of trust in the judiciary. And even the social media algorithms work in such a way that the posts that cause for a negative response are circulated much more intensely than those positive posts. And the same applies to the perception of the judiciary by the people. I don't want to use the word promotion here, but the thing is that the negative aspects of the judiciary are being highlighted, and that's why people lack trust. On the other hand, we have many positive qualities in our judiciary. We have some fine examples where lawful and just decisions are made, but nobody is telling you about them. I have this professional deformity that I want to talk for a very long time because I'm a lecturer, so you need to interrupt me if my answer is too long.
Пані Ірино, ви у пункті 8 свого мотиваційного листа
Answering our question number 8 in your motivational letter, you are referring to the European principles of zero tolerance of corruption, as well as constitutional principles of the independence of judiciary, enhancement of the general legal culture, and legal conscientiousness of the people. So what should the primary steps of the new HQCJ be for you to achieve these objectives? Well, the primary steps. First of all, we should pay attention to the issue of interaction with the Public Integrity Council, because the participation of the public in the selection or qualification assessment of judges cannot be underestimated. It's something that should be improved. And here we should be following such principles as openness, motivation, and mutual respect. If Public Integrity Council has some reservations or concerns with regards to a candidate, and the Qualification Commission or the High Council of Justice try to overcome these concerns without providing justification or motivation by overruling it with a majority of votes, then it means that the Public Integrity Council must feel themselves as like I felt myself during that case in the court. So it feels as if everything that they're doing is not being taken into account.
ВКПС
So
не погоджується.
if the HQCJ does not agree with the concerns expressed by the Public Integrity Council, they need to provide specific motivations or justifications for their decision. That's clear. Thank you. Is it the end of your answer? Yes. Yes, I finished answering this question.
The matter now turns over to me, Ted Zarzechny, a member of the commission, and I'm going to try and pronounce your last name is Hazdaika-Vasylyshyn. I hope that's close. Professor, let me say that I have reviewed your information, as have my colleagues, very thoroughly, and your career as an academic has been very accomplished, and you can be justifiably proud of that. I wonder, however, quite apart from that, we are concerned with appointing members to the High Qualification Commission of Judges of Ukraine. And I wonder, have you studied the process and procedures of the High Qualification Commission of Judges? Have you read the very extensive regulations that have been passed by the past High Qualification Commission so that you have an understanding of the work that it does?
Так.
Yes.
All right. What do you think of the criteria that are set out in the regulations respecting the criteria of integrity and the analysis of integrity by the High Qualification Commission?
Про аналіз доброчесності.
Well, if we talk about the criteria of integrity and the analysis of the criteria of integrity, it appears to me that we cannot measure integrity by some mathematical formula. Well, of course, we can develop, design some criteria, but it will all be very artificial.
Доброчесність, вона або є,
You either have integrity or not.
так? І оцінка чужої доброчесності.
The assessment of somebody else's integrity is something very challenging, and I
Цим і займається
will not be telling you this because that's what you're doing at this very moment.
майбутнє ВКПС. І це надзвичайно відповідальна справа.
It's extremely responsible.
Може здатися, що
I understand that
я, можливо,
it may appear that
в професійному плані.
I've not yet gained enough competence here. I don't really understand what the point of your question is. Could you please clarify it?
Well, let me move on to another area that I intend to deal with you. And I think we are all acquainted with the work of law professors. Some of us are involved as law professors or educators in the law. It involves a great deal of theory, of course, and the practical application of the theory is often left to work experience in the law. There are those who feel that for a person to be in a position to make a judgment about an applicant to be appointed to the judiciary, they must be very familiar with the work that the judges do, not in a theoretical sense, but in a practical sense, day to day. What is the work that a judge does, and how is a candidate to be appointed a judge qualified to meet the responsibilities and the duties of a judge? Your resume does not seem to suggest that you had very much, if any, experience as a lawyer. I don't know if you, in connection with any of your experience, have done any work in the courts to personally experience the work of a judge and judges. You did tell us about an experience, but you suggest that you are a quick learner, and with a volume of work that is faced by the High Qualification Commission of Judges, that is going to be required of every member of the High Qualification Commission. They're going to have to very quickly learn it. But your history of work does not appear to reflect much acquaintance or knowledge that you have about the day-to-day work of a judge, particularly judges of first instance. So how do you respond to that circumstance?
Yes, that is true. I indeed don't have practical experience, a vast practical experience of working with the courts, but it appears to me that for this very reason we have 8 members who are judges and 8 members who are lawyers on HQCJ. I understand that there are attorneys at law, there are prosecutors, and they have this practical experience of working in courts. But again, for teamwork, it is important to have a combination of theory and practice. Because, of course, practitioners have their own advantages, theoreticians have their own strong sides. Am I aware of what a judge should do in their day-to-day work? Yes, of course. And maybe I have even more information about that than the average person does, because I have a degree in law and I also talk to my colleagues who also deal with criminal law, criminal procedure. Of course, this is not practical experience of working in court. I'm not trying to prove you wrong, because I don't have this experience. But for teamwork, it's important to have a combination of different experiences and different skills. If 8 members of the future commission have lots of practical experience, then I can be of value with my theoretical experience, and it's right combination with the practice, because I do research practice. Science is impossible without analysis and generalization of court practice, without identification of the existing issues. So I cannot tell you that I'm only a theoretician.
Just one other very brief question. During your work as an academic, have you ever volunteered or participated in education of judge candidates at the National School of Judges?
No. No, I haven't.
I see, and there is a campus of the National School of Judges in Lviv.
Наскільки я орієнтуюсь, то так.
As far as I know, yes.
Yes, all right. Thank you very much. Those are all the questions I have. Mr. Chairman?
Вітаю, пані Ірино, ще раз.
Irina, welcome again.
Ви спеціаліст кримінального права.
So you're a specialist in criminal law, so let's talk about criminal law a little bit.
Завідомо неправосудного рішення має право на
So,
існування чи ні?
an unjust decision, does it have the right to exist?
Ви і поясніть нам.
Consciously illegal decision. Can you explain this to us?
Я вважаю, що відповідальність
I do believe that the responsibility of a judge
цілком можлива.
who made an unlawful decision on purpose lies with him.
Незалежність від закону.
It's the travesty of justice.
Суддя наважився прийняти
If a judge decided to make this decision that he knew was unlawful,
чому він не повинен нести
why shouldn't he be responsible for this decision?
не розумію.
Why should he not be held to account?
Прийняті ними рішення, так? Але коли йдеться про
When we are talking about violations of the law,
самодисциплінарну відповідальність,
for instance, disciplinary charges, well,
наслідок там недбалості,
judges
ухвалив рішення, порушив.
can have disciplinary charges imposed against them if they violated human rights or if they did something else.
Тому, особисто моє бачення,
My personal opinion
норма в кримінальному кодексі
is that we need this norm in the criminal code.
Ту легкість, з якою можна
And
порушити кримінальну
taking
справу.
into
Чи не
account
вважаєте
how
ви, що,
easy it is to
інструмент
initiate
порушення
criminal
кримінальної
proceedings,
справи
don't you
за
think
завідомо неправосудне рішення
that
може стати
having
одним з
criminal
інструментів
proceedings
тиску
for
на суд?
miscarriage of justice can be an instrument of pressure on judges? Yes, it may be used as an instrument of pressure. And how should we fight it then? The question is that we need to think about how we formulate this kind of offense.
в цьому вигляді мала продовжувати.
I'm not saying that what we previously had in the criminal court was criminal code was perfect. It's hard for me to tell you what the structure of this offense or crime will be. I'm not ready to answer this question.
Але незалежність не повинна
But independence should not mean impunity.
процедуру якби порушення кримінального
So,
провадження.
the procedure of initiating criminal proceedings in this case, I understand what you are driving at here. So somebody may be accused of wrongdoing in any situation. It's not just about miscarriage of justice, because some people may complain about a judge getting a bribe or committing any other type of offense, but there are
В кримінальному кодексі достатньо.
different tools of pressure on judges. They are present there in the criminal code.
Прийняли якесь рішення, можливо,
We don't even need to wait for that judge to make any decision, and we can already
завідомо також неправдивої
have a statement about that crime, about that judge committing a crime.
запобіжники, так, кримінального
So there should be some
кожен же ж теж знає.
things in the criminal code that could prevent people from accusing someone.
Але, як мінімум,
Yes, we do have these instruments in the criminal code, but again, we are talking about the valuable time and the resources that the state first spends on hearing, on considering these statements about somebody committing a crime, then initiating criminal proceedings, then looking into the motives of such statements.
Скажіть, будь ласка, на ваш погляд,
Well, thank you, that is clear.
до якої міри
In your opinion, to what degree, and do we even have this degree, the maximum of criticism that the people can exert to criticize the decisions of judges? Criticism must be motivated. What kind of degree are we talking to? We must respect core decisions. There should be a balance in here, because
рішення, яке набрало,
criticizing a decision that has been enforced,
ну, це треба мати дуже серйозні
you need to have really serious grounds to do that. Do you use social media, by the way? Yes, of course.
Ну, ви ж бачили якісь пости в соцмережах?
You must have seen posts on social media about a court decision being made and people writing their comments below.
Як вам здається,
In your opinion,
чи це нормальна ситуація?
is it a normal situation? Should we keep this practice?
Безумовно, має право
Because the
критикувати.
public sure has the right to criticize.
Все ж таки, ну, зустрічні якісь
Or
дії
should we
з боку
have
судової системи,
some measures that could be taken by the judiciary, at least
ґрунтованої критики?
urging the people to provide some justified criticism? What should we do about criticism? And do we even need to do something about it? Yes, of course, we need to do something with the criticism. The criticism must be justified. What people are writing on the social media quite often
абсолютно, ну, нічим не
appears as some unmotivated statements.
Не знаю, чи люди таким чином підвищують власне.
I don't know if that's a way for people to look better in their own eyes. I don't know why they're doing it.
Зрозуміло, що коли йдеться там про
But it's clear when we are talking about offending people,
упередження, не те, що упередження,
when we are talking about some accusations that have not been proven, of course, we should not be allowing such things.
як судова влада має на це реагувати?
How should the judiciary respond to this?
Тим самим мірилом обґрунтовано
Maybe using the same measure of justification.
комусь здалося, що
If it appeared to a person that the decision of the court was wrong, but that person has no knowledge of how the judiciary functions, they don't know anything about the parties and the motivation of the decision, I think we can disregard such comments because such comments are unmotivated.
така мені згадалася приказка українська.
And here I remembered this Ukrainian saying, I don't know the origin. In order to understand a person, you need to step into their shoes and walk their way, take the journey instead of them. So sometimes people don't follow this rule. They express some emotions on the spot, which may disappear in a short period of time, and they don't use any facts, any evidence while making such statements.
Зрозуміла ваша позиція.
Thank you. Your position is clear.
Співвідношення судової практики Вищого антикорупційного
Could you please tell us about the ratio between the practice of the High Anti-Corruption Court and the Supreme Court of Ukraine? The correlation of the practices of the two courts. So do you mean who has more priority or what? No. I know who has the priority.
Тому що по деяким принциповим питанням
The question is that on some of the principled issues of criminal law, the High Anti-Corruption Court and the Supreme Court of Ukraine
ваша позиція як
have different opinions. So what's your idea about this as a researcher? As a researcher, I believe that we need to look for reasons which have resulted in different interpretations of one and the same provision of law. I think we have these differences in interpretation because of the lack of quality of the legislation. Because if everything is put in clear language and it doesn't allow for ambiguity, then we will not have different interpretations. And it's not just about the Supreme Court or the High Anti-Corruption Court. All the courts will interpret such a norm in the same way. So I think that
Зменшувати такі
in order to decrease the number of different interpretations, we have to be more careful about our lawmaking process.
орієнтуються в тому,
And as far as I know how our laws are being adopted,
виникають законопроекти,
and how draft laws are being introduced and what is being suggested in them, quite often they are drafted not even by lawyers. Very often the authors of draft laws are people who don't have any understanding of what law is, who don't have degrees in law. And I was reviewing one of the draft laws which suggested introducing criminal responsibility for introducing draft laws that contradict the constitution of Ukraine. So from the moment such a draft law is introduced for the consideration of the parliament, it's suggested that it's already a crime.
Старалося воно би з альтернативним позбавленням волі.
And the punishment for that should be imprisonment. And should our MPs adopt this norm, they could one day find themselves in a difficult situation. But again, against the norms of the Constitution, we have it that our MPs bear no responsibility for the voting taking place in the parliament. So for us to have a uniformity of practice, we should strive to have better laws, a better quality of our laws. Your position is clear. Thank you. I don't have any more questions.
So it's back to me, I guess, Mr. President.
Right.
Yes? Yeah, I've one thing came to my mind listening to everything you say, which I find a bit difficult to ask you, but we have to be transparent, so I will ask you so you know what I think. You will recall that we asked you a question about a car of your husband, a Nissan X-Trail, where there was an accident, and then it appeared that your husband drove in this car, and that this car was not declared in the declaration you had to make. And you explained, when we asked you this question, that you were not aware about this car incident. You recall this, huh? Yes?
Yes. Yes.
Yes, well, I understand sometimes that I found it a bit strange when I read that, because if my wife would be in a car accident, I think I would know, normally. But any marriage is different. You cannot look in someone else's marriage. So I accepted that for the time being. However, you also just said that when you were asked, I believe, by Mr. Metsensev about the apartment, that you do not know what the origin of the money is for the apartment. And then Yevgen asked you a following-up question, and he said, well, but that's a bit strange because you're living so long together. And then you said something about yeah, well, it's in the beginning, blah, blah. And then you explained that later you haven't touched on this subject. But it is a bit of the same. It's something like information that normally you would share in a marriage, where you say, well, I don't know that. And then there's the third one, which triggered me, that is the questions about the fact that you are...
What I meant is that I didn't know the price of the apartment. I didn't ask him about the price of the apartment. So here the assumption is that I should be asking my husband, what's the source of money that you've used to buy this apartment? I don't know how to formulate a question like that. So he has this one-bedroom apartment, so what questions should I be asking him about it?
But let me finish my question, because I was not there yet. Yes? The third thing is...
Sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, the third thing is that Yevgen Metsensev discussed with you the political part, the political job of your husband. And you explained that you are not sharing the same views politically with your husband, and that you think about issues differently. And that means that the political relation there exists. It's on his side, and it doesn't touch you when you are applying for this job. And of course, when we are looking for people in the HQCJ, one of the rules that applies is that there is no political connection. And on basis of the first two incidents, I thought, is it true that the fact that your husband is a politician doesn't touch your political environment? Is it so that you are free in taking, let's say, free in any political connection? And the question I have to you, maybe in general, I find it a bit strange, and I find it difficult to ask. That apparently this, your husband is a bit far away, and you don't know certain things. And the follow-up question is, I would normally think that if your husband is a politician and he has certain views, that you will know his friends and the people he's working with. He will come in your house to discuss politics, and you will have friends that are his friends who share possibly the same kind of political ideas. So maybe you can explain that indeed you are politically independent.
Я можу розпочати відповідь? Так, давайте по
So
порядку. Я так розумію,
let's
що там
take
було
the
три
questions
запитання.
in the order you've asked them. There have been three questions. So the first one about the accident. That was not a critical major accident. There was a small problem with the car, and this car does not belong to my husband. He doesn't own this car. This is his job car, office car, which belongs to a limited liability company, and that's why I did not indicate it as the object which is in my ownership or in the ownership of my husband. This is a limited liability company where he has some corporate rights, and I indicated this in the declaration, but probably I filled the declaration in the wrong way. It was for the first time I actually filled the declaration. Probably I could make a mistake. Not purposefully, of course. As far as the apartment is concerned, I've already mentioned that when we got acquainted, that was a one-room apartment that belonged to him. He was the owner of this apartment before our acquaintance. And I was not present during the period when he was buying this apartment. I did not the cost, the value of the apartment, and the origin of the money. As far as political engagement and political work of my husband is concerned, it seems to me that it should be perceived more like family ties with a person who has some political activity. But whether this affects me and whether this can really be the grounds or the reasons for my political engagement, I'm sure that no. Otherwise you can also tell that he is a lawyer, probably he knows some connection problems, so that he is a lawyer and has some relationship or some acquaintances. Can you hear me? There are some technical issues. If you could repeat your answer to the last two statements, we haven't heard them quite well. Just your image, your video stopped when you said that, for example, suppose my husband is a lawyer, an attorney at law. Yes, if he is an attorney at law, you can say that he has some judges as his acquaintances or some other attorneys at law, and thus I could somehow be under the influence of those people via my husband. But in fact, it seems to me that family ties and connections are really important, but I'm not performing all the requests my husband or somebody else via my husband could actually make. That's not so. I know how to say no to people, to my children, to my husband. That's why I don't think that this should be a problem, and that this can somehow justify to my political engagement. When I mentioned that we have different and divergent views, of course, I didn't mean our views in general, only in some
десь в якомусь побутовому
elements.
спілкуванні ми можемо
And in some routine daily communications, sometimes
такої полеміки дійти
we may
щодо
have heated
конкретної
polemics
скажімо так,
concerning
політичного життя, так,
some specific political act, but this doesn't mean that I do not
його політичної діяльності,
support, they don't object to political activity of my husband. If he is willing to go into politics, why not? This doesn't mean that I should be going into politics or that this should have some effect on me.
No further questions for me, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, may I? Of course. Пані Анно, ну, ми повернулися до мене. Перепрошую.
Irina?
Ірина, я дуже
Oh, sorry, I
Трішки я вже втомився за
mentioned the wrong name. A little bit tired, probably. So, Irina,
Власне, за роботу в цій комісії, я її здійснюю на громадських
you know, while I'm working in this selection commission, I do this pro bono, which means I don't get anything for this. But I have a chance to communicate with many smart people, and I'm using this occasion, you know.
Я хотів би вам навіть не питання,
And let me give you a piece of advice. It's not the question, it's just a piece of advice, as the advice given to a specialist in criminal law. If you take such primitive corruption act as bribery, of course, during pre-trial investigations, you always take measures to prevent future corruption acts. I don't remember exactly the way it's called. That would, you take measures that would prevent such things from happening. This is the major obligatory part of every pre-trial investigation. What do you think concerning this corpus delicti, the bribery act? What would be the key mechanism, or what would be the key measure that could be taken within, well, not even Ukraine, but globally? If you had immediate and indefinite power, what could you do? What kind of mechanism could you do for this aspect of human life not to be perceived as a positive thing, first of all, and not to be perceived as something that can generally be allowed and could solve somebody's problems? So how could we, in other words, effectively prevent such criminal manifestations as bribery, if you had indefinite power for that? Just at least one proposal that would be effective.
важко собі таке уявити, що ти наділений безмежною владою.
It's actually very difficult to imagine that I have immediate and indefinite power, but I think that then we should start with the kindergarten, with upbringing of children.
Не давати дітям мінятися іграшками?
Does it mean that children shouldn't give their toys to other children? No, well, exchanging toys is a good thing to do. I just think that in the kindergarten, that could be some animated cartoon about the karma which is persecuting every corrupt person who takes bribes.
Ну, зрозуміло.
Well, okay.
Зрозуміло, дякую.
Okay, thank you.
Відповідь прийнята, дякую.
I've got your answer. Thank you, Ivan.
Є запитання до кандидата?
Are there any other questions to the candidate?
Інтерв'ю до
Irina, so the interview is approaching its end, and the Commission gives you the right to give the concluding speech. Maybe you would like to mention something you have forgotten or didn't have a chance to tell, you want to stress something, so some key things. Please, you're welcome.
Ну, звичайно, ще би багато про що я
Well, there are a lot of things I would like to communicate about with you, but I understand that we don't have time. Today you have already 4 interviews for candidates, enjoying your attention.
сказати, що для мене
I would like to express my gratitude to you, and I would say that for me, participation even at this stage of the competition, of the selection procedure, is already a victory, because it's already an achievement, and I'm really grateful to you for selecting me already to this second stage. And since I'm not taking the oath, and the members of the HQCJ are not taking the oath, as I know, I would like to give you a promise that if all of a sudden it so happens that I'm still elected, chosen one of the 16 members of the HQCJ, you will never be sorry for this decision of yours. This means that you will not dismiss us from our positions if we breach something, right? No, I just promise that you will not be sorry for this decision of yours, for my appointment. And I will really take pains to really justify your trust and to perform this mission in a due and adequate way. But the fact that you can actually take an offense, well, I cannot imagine this now, as for now. But things happen. You never say never. But I wouldn't like to be in this situation when you do this. So I hope this will not happen.
Дякуємо вам за
Thank you. Thank you for the interview.
На цьому вона завершена.
So that's the end of the interview. Goodbye. Thanks again. Goodbye.